So we're probably thinking that the worst thing is going to happen, that people are going to think the worst of us, people are not going to like us, that things are going to go wrong. Hi, and welcome to Therapy Explained. My name is Deniss. I'm the therapist of color for people of color and your very own mental health cheerleader. Today's video is kicking off our anxiety series. For the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about what anxiety is, how to manage it. I'll be sharing my favorite interventions, coping skills, and all my knowledge about anxiety to help you get started on your management of anxiety and or to supplement the work that you're already probably doing in your own therapy. So let's go ahead and just jump right to it. What is anxiety? Anxiety is a normal and very common emotional and physical experience. We all have some form of anxiety at some point in our lives. Generalized anxiety disorder is a clinical diagnosis that you do have to be assessed for by a mental health professional or a medical doctor. It is within the spectrum of anxious diagnoses. It ranges from generalized anxiety disorder to something more severe like PTSD. Throughout the series and for today, we're just going to be talking about the anxiety that we all experience to some level. As we continue to talk about anxiety, if you do have a clinical diagnosis for any sort of anxious diagnosis, then a lot of these things might sound very familiar to you and they might feel more intense than they do for other people. But regardless of what your experience is with anxiety, a lot of these interventions and coping skills should be helpful to you no matter how intense and how common they are for you. So, what does anxiety actually feel like in our bodies? Anxiety is a response by our bodies and our brain to a sense of loss of power or control and to a perceived real or not real threat to our body or to our emotional well-being as well. Our heart rate will become very rapid, so will our breathing. We'll have trouble staying still, so there's a lot of restlessness. Anxiety can really be felt in our body. We might feel very tense, like have a lot of muscle aches because our muscles are so tense, and we might also be having trouble falling asleep. It can also disrupt our eating habits, so we might feel very, very hungry at some points, or we might lose our appetite altogether. It can also make it really hard for us to concentrate and therefore to make memories or to remember things correctly or appropriately. It also makes us pretty irritable, pretty tired. It's very common for those of us who have intense anxiety to feel really tired because our body is working so hard that even just sitting still and regular day-to-day things can feel very exhausting for us. But anxiety also happens in our thoughts. It's very common for us, if we're struggling with anxiety, to experience cognitive distortions. Now, I will have a video talking more about cognitive distortions and how to manage them, but really, in general, what a cognitive distortion is, they are distorted thoughts. So negative thoughts like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, trying to read people's minds, thinking you know what other people are going to say and do, and it usually is not the best. So we're probably thinking that the worst thing is going to happen, that people are going to think the worst of us, people are not going to like us, that things are going to go wrong. So these are all called cognitive distortions. We have a lot of negative thoughts. We also tend to have a lot of ruminating or experience ruminating, which means that we get stuck on a thought or an experience. We might stay up really late night thinking about all the things that we said to embarrass ourselves or something that happened like 10 or 20 years ago that is still bothering us, that we feel anxious about or embarrassed about or worried about. So ruminating is also a pretty common symptom for us when we're struggling with anxiety, and that's what it looks like in our heads. We might also be thinking about a lot of ifs and constantly thinking about the things that could or would happen tomorrow. So again, there's a lot of running thoughts. Our brain feels really, really busy, which adds to that feeling of constant exhaustion that I mentioned earlier. So Now that we know what anxiety can feel like in our bodies and what it feels like in our heads, let's talk about why we might be experiencing anxiety in the first place. Anxiety can be triggered, as I mentioned, by a severe traumatic incident or a traumatic incident in which we felt a complete loss of safety, a complete loss of control, and probably an overwhelming sense of helplessness and hopelessness. This can be something like an accident, something that actually happened to us that we experienced, or having watched or witnessed somebody else in a traumatic experience. So vicarious trauma, we're talking racial trauma, immigration trauma, historical trauma, any sort of abuse, parental attachments and wounds. So really there's a lot that can be causing and triggering our anxiety if we experienced a pretty traumatic experience at a very young age or at any point in our lives. This makes our body feel very afraid and unsafe, and it's hard for our body to come back to homeostasis and regain that sense of safety. That's why everything in our body is turned on. It's trying to get as much information from the world around it to assess for safety constantly. And so as you'll hear and as you'll notice, a lot of the coping skills that I talk about address a lot of this directly. But of course, anxiety can also be triggered by normal life events. Anxiety is common for us when we encounter an experience that is new or completely unknown to us. The first time that we try anything, our first interview, our first trip, our first interaction with someone, our first tend to make us feel anxious because we don't know what's going to happen, and our body and our brain completely turns on because, again, it's trying to gather as much information about this new experience to prepare us for any sort of protection that we might need. And again, that's why our anxiety is triggered, because it's something new. So this also applies to any sort of big life changes that we might be experiencing. This can trigger our anxiety. So again, anxiety is a normal experience that we might be having overall that's just triggered by regular life experiences, but it can also be super heightened and we can get stuck in an anxious phase due to a traumatic incident. So now we know what it feels like in our body, we know what it feels like in our head, and we have a better idea of why we might be experiencing anxiety. Now let's talk about what do we do about it? How can we manage it? So, of course, the best coping skills for your anxiety are going to be coping skills that address all of the symptoms directly. As we talked about anxiety, we mentioned how much we feel it in our bodies. Our tense muscles, our rapid breathing, our rapid heart rate, this restlessness. So the best thing to do with it is to teach our body to stop, to relax, and to send messages to our body that we are safe and it doesn't need to work that hard. The best kind of activities are grounding activities. So things that help you regain kind of a sense of monotony and rhythm to your system. Something like going for walks, journaling, puzzling. These are all pretty sedentary activities that don't require too much, that help your body slow down. That is key for our anxiety, which leads me to the best and one of my favorite things to recommend for anxiety: yoga and meditation. The reason for this is that it is going to address the biggest parts of your anxiety, which is the restlessness, the rapid heart rate, the rapid breathing, but also your thoughts. Both yoga and meditation focus on teaching you how to relax your body, but also how to manage the thoughts that are coming up for you. This is why they're my favorite. There's a lot of free meditation and yoga videos on YouTube that you can have access to. Yes, there's also studios and apps that you can do that you can try to check out and pay for, but it's not absolutely necessary. So I do encourage you to give it a try if you haven't already. Ultimately, if meditation and yoga are not for you, that's totally fine. Try to come up with a grounding tool. If you need some help in developing coping skills that actually work for you and will help you, make sure to check out this video on coping skills. But again, any sort of grounding tool can help you. With this, of course, can also come exercise. So yoga is a little bit like exercise. Of course, it's helping your body. You can also do gentle movement for your body, like just stretching it or going for walks. Those are wonderful. Again, we want to immediately and directly address the symptoms that you actually experience that are body centered. Running is wonderful, dancing is wonderful, hiking, climbing, biking, whatever it is that you want to do to readdress and refocus your physical energy can also be helpful for your anxiety. And it's also really wonderful for our sleep. And it also helps our brain make really good hormones to make us feel happier and help us manage our anxiety. So exercise is wonderful because it helps our body inside and out. And of course, lastly, when we're talking about our thoughts, thought challenging is going to be key as well. Learning how to identify the thoughts that you're having connected to your anxiety and learning how to challenge them. Sit with yourself and try to keep track of these thoughts. Try to name as many as you can throughout the day. Keep track of them if you want to, even in written form, so that you have a better idea of how often and how severe these thoughts might be for you. When you actually write them down and then look at them, you realize that maybe you're having a lot of negative thoughts, and it can sometimes help you get a better idea of how intense your anxiety is. So let's review before we go. Number one, anxiety is a normal human experience. It's triggered by life changes, but also by traumatic experiences. Anxiety is experienced in our body, but also in our thoughts. And the best coping skills will address both of these. So physical exercise, grounding tools, thought challenging, and refocusing of your physical and mental energy are going to be one of the best things that you can do for yourself and for your body. Now, progress does require practice, so if you give any of these tools, ideas, and tips a try, please make sure to comment down below and let me know how it goes. Of course, if there is something that is already helping you, comment down below and share it with us. Remember, we are a community and we want to help each other out, so if there's something that already helps you, please share it with the rest of us. We might find it really helpful. Make sure that you check out your cheat sheet. It's already available to you on Instagram. But before you hop on over to Instagram, make sure to give this video some love in whatever way feels authentic to you. Give it a thumbs up, share it, comment below, subscribe. Any sort of love that you show to this video is super, super helpful for me. It helps spread the word, it helps grow the channel, and I would be very appreciative to you for it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, I'm always cheering for you.